Welcome to the History in Focus channel. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss more videos like this one.
George Stinney was 14 years old when he was electrocuted in 1944 in South Carolina. The trial lasted 2 hours. The all-white jury decided in 10 minutes. His feet did not touch the floor of the chair. In 2014, the sentence was overturned. Jesse Owens won 4 gold medals in Berlin 1936 in front of Hitler. The German rival Lutz Long gave him the technical advice that helped him in the long jump. Long died 3 years later in Sicily. The two exchanged letters until the end. Sophie Scholl was guillotined in February of 1943, 6 days after being arrested distributing White Rose pamphlets in Munich. She was 21 years old. The executioner, Johann Reichardt, said afterward that he had never executed anyone so calm. George Blind, a 40-year-old French firefighter, was captured by the Gestapo in October of 1944, accused of helping the resistance. To make him give up names, the German firing squad staged a mock execution. He smiled at the rifles. He said nothing. He was sent to Auschwitz days later and killed upon arrival. General Eisenhower visited Ohrdruf, the first Nazi camp liberated by the Americans, in April of 1945. He ordered troops and journalists to record everything. At Buchenwald, he forced residents of the surrounding area to visit the camp so that nobody could later say they did not know. It was the first time civilians were forced to confront what their government had done. Many fainted, and 3 committed suicide in the following days. Ned Parfit sold newspapers on Ludgate Hill in London on April 16, 1912. The photo of him with the Titanic headline was taken by a colleague. 5 years later, at 21 years old, he died on the Western Front during World War I. Hachiko and Akita Inu waited for his owner at Shibuya Station every day for 9 years, even after Hidesaburo Ueno died at work in 1925. He only stopped appearing when he himself died in 1935. The statue was erected while the dog was still alive in 1934, and the Japanese people began coming daily to feed him. Hachiko's body is preserved and on display at the National Museum of Tokyo to this day. The Gibb sisters, Daisy and Violet, were conjoined twins and became famous in the films of the 1930s. They shared pelvic circulation. They married different men without ever having separate lives. They died in January of 1969 on the same day. This photo shows Billy the Kid playing croquet with the Regulators gang after a wedding in 1878. It took 5 years of analysis using facial recognition, chemical dating, and costume study to authenticate. Today, it is valued at $5 million. Jacob Miller was shot by a musket between the eyes at Chickamauga in 1863 and was given up for dead by his comrades. The doctors could not remove the bullet. He lived 54 years with the hole open in his forehead, and lead fragments continued to come out until 1894. Robert McGee was scalped by Chief Little Turtle in 1864 at 13 years old. He survived because the attackers thought he was already dead. He spent the rest of his life in circuses of the Midwest, exhibiting the scar for 5 cents a look. Harriet Tubman made 13 secret trips through the South and freed about 70 people. She never lost a single fugitive. During the Civil War, she became a Union spy and led a raid that freed more than 700 slaves in a single night on the Combahee River. The Kiss of Life was taken in 1967 in Jacksonville. Randall Champion took 4,160 volts and hung by his belt at the top of the pole. His colleague, J.D. Thompson, climbed up, performed mouth-to-mouth resuscitation while hanging, and Champion survived. The TCDED dioxin used against Yushchenko in 2004 was approximately 50,000 times above the normal level in the body. It is one of the most toxic substances in existence. He survived, won the election, and nobody was ever arrested for the crime. Janina Nowak was the first woman to survive and escape from Auschwitz. She jumped from a moving cargo car in June of 1942. As punishment, the Nazis shaved the heads of all the women in her block. Janina lived until 2013 in Poland. Ruby Bridges entered William Frantz Elementary in 1960 with an escort of 4 U.S. Marshals. White parents withdrew all their children. She spent the first year alone with a single teacher who agreed to teach a black child. King Leopold II used African pygmies as attractions in European human zoos until the 1950s. Commercial hunts used pygmies as trackers, paid with salt and tobacco. The eastern gorilla population fell more than 75%. Marilyn Monroe personally called the owner of the Macombo in Los Angeles and promised to sit in the front row every night if Ella Fitzgerald performed at the club. The club only accepted white patrons. Ella played. Her career took off. A couple hides under a bridge during the Tiananmen Square massacre in China. The generation born after 1989 grew up without knowing what happened. The term June 4th is blocked. Of the 29 scientists gathered at the Solvay Conference of 1927, 17 won the Nobel Prize. It was at this meeting that Einstein and Bohr argued for the first time about quantum mechanics. Marie Curie is the only person in the photo with 2 Nobels, physics and chemistry, seen from the trial of Al Capone in 1931. The mobsters present hid their faces to avoid being identified by the press. Al Capone was being tried for tax evasion. He got 11 years. The Statue of Liberty was a gift from France. It was built in pieces in Paris and shipped in 350 crates to New York. The original torch was displayed in Central Park for 6 years, while Americans crowdfunded to pay for the pedestal. The Times Square kiss of 1945 was taken by Alfred Eisenstadt. For decades, nobody knew who the two were. In 2012, the sailor George Mendonça was identified. The nurse Greta Friedman did not even know him. Simone Seguin began sabotaging German trains at 17. At 18, she helped capture 25 Nazis in Chartres. The photo of her armed with an MP40 became a life cover. She died in 2023 at 97 years old, decorated with the French Legion of Honor. Rosa Shanina was the first woman on the Soviet Baltic Front to receive the Order of Glory. She had 59 confirmed kills with a rifle. She died in combat at 20 years old, protecting a wounded officer. Her personal diary was published afterward. Christina Pawlowski, a 30-year-old Polish woman, shot this saltwater crocodile with a single bullet on the banks of the Norman River in Australia in July of 1957. The animal measured 28 feet and 4 inches, the largest ever recorded. Wojtek, the Polish bear of the 22nd Corps, was adopted as a cub in Iran in 1942 by soldiers retreating from the USSR. He smoked cigarettes, drank beer, and carried ammunition at the Battle of Monte Cassino. He received an official rank of corporal. Sam Scher spent 5 hours waiting for the Hindenburg to land in 1937. He captured the moment of the explosion in 10 seconds. Of the 97 people on board, 36 died. It was the end of the era of commercial airships and the first disaster covered live on radio. Anton Dossler was the first German general executed for war crimes in Italy. In 1944, he ordered the execution of 15 OSS soldiers, even though they were in uniform. The defense argued he was just following orders. It did not work. On November 30th, 1939, Stalin proclaimed the Finnish Democratic Republic as the legitimate government of Finland and signed a treaty with it on the same day the USSR invaded the country. The puppet government was based in Terioki. The Winter War lasted 105 days. Finland lost territory but kept its independence. The USSR lost 167,000 soldiers against 26,000 Finns. Residents line up to receive food in communist Romania in the late 1980s. Each family was entitled to about 2 pounds of meat per month, about 1 pound of sugar, and about half a quart of oil. The lines started at 4 in the morning, and the first in line sold their spot in exchange for cigarettes. The USSR lost approximately 27 million people in World War II, 1 in every 7 Soviets. Entire villages were left with only elderly women. Mothers who lost 3 or more children received the title of Hero Mother. Some lost all of them. The Tambov Rebellion in 1920 was the largest peasant revolt against the Bolsheviks. The farmers refused the forced confiscation of grain. Tukhachevsky used poison gas against civilians, a practice he later copied in Warsaw the following year. About 100,000 Tambovians died. The rebellion was only officially mentioned in the USSR after 1989 with Glasnost. Hitler declared war on the United States on December 11, 1941, 4 days after Pearl Harbor. The speech at the Kroll Opera House lasted an hour and a half. It was a strategic mistake. The United States could have stayed focused only on Japan. Ribbentrop tried to prevent it, without success. Adolf Hitler smiles upon receiving the news of the French surrender in June of 1940. The photo was taken minutes after the telegram announcing that the Pétain government had accepted the armistice terms. Mussolini's Italy entered the war in June of 1940, thinking France was already defeated. In 2 weeks, it lost 5,000 soldiers in the Alps against a French army that was retreating. The fiasco continued until the fall of the regime in 1943. In April of 1969, 80 armed black students occupied Willard Straight Hall at Cornell, demanding an African-American studies program. They came out 36 hours later with rifles. The photo shocked the United States. The university conceded, and one of the leaders became CEO of TIAA-CREF. A promotional scene from the Soviet film Come and See from 1985, known for depicting with brutal realism the atrocities committed in occupied Belarus during World War II. The director used real ammunition in some scenes, and the lead actor, Alexei Kravchenko, was 14 years old. Reuben Hurricane Carter, a promising middleweight, was arrested in 1966, accused of triple murder in New Jersey. The conviction was based on 2 witnesses who changed their stories multiple times. He served 19 years before a federal judge overturned the sentence in 1985, saying the trial was based on racism. Bob Dylan wrote Hurricane in 1975 about the case. Gloria Richardson led the Cambridge Nonviolent Action Committee in 1963. Maryland had more segregation laws than Mississippi. When the National Guard was sent, she pushed the soldier's rifle away with her hand and said, "Do not threaten me." The photo became a poster. She refused to shake Robert Kennedy's hand. She died in 2021 at 99 years old. In March of 1991, Kurds and Shiites rose up against Saddam Hussein after the Gulf War. Bush Sr. had publicly called for the revolt. When Saddam used helicopters against the rebels, the United States did not intervene. More than 100,000 Kurds died fleeing. The Wehrmacht had an official chaplaincy. About 500 Catholic priests and 500 Lutheran pastors served German troops. Franz Justus Warkowski, bishop of the Wehrmacht between 1938 and 1945, blessed tanks and troops on the front. The Vatican never excommunicated him. Warkowski died in 1950 without trial. The Vatican archives on the war were only opened in 2020, after 75 years. The Italian garrison of Tobruk in Libya surrendered to the British in January of 1941, after 8 weeks of siege. More than 25,000 prisoners were captured. Italy expected to control Egypt in a few weeks. It lost all of North Africa in 2 years. In May of 1980, the Trump Organization evicted Mary Phelan and 65 other tenants from Central Park South in New York. Phelan was 74 years old, was a widow, and had suffered a stroke. Trump wanted to demolish the building to construct a luxury tower. The press covered the case. The state of New York sued the company for intimidation, and Trump lost. The building was never demolished. In 1945, Warsaw had 85% of its buildings destroyed by the Nazis. Photographers used painted screens as backdrops because the rubble was the only possible landscape for photographing living people amid the reconstruction. The last official duel in France was in 1967 between Gaston Defferre, socialist mayor of Marseille, and René Ribière, Gaullist deputy. Defferre cut Ribiere's arm twice in 4 minutes. The reason? An insult in Parliament. The Harlem Hellfighters spent 191 days on the front line, more than any American unit. France awarded them the collective Croix de Guerre. They returned in 1919, paraded down Fifth Avenue, and faced Jim Crow laws the next day. The punt gun was up to about 10 feet long and fired about 1 pound of lead per shot. Hunters brought down 50 ducks with a single blast. It was banned in the United States in 1918. In 30 years, it nearly wiped out entire populations of migratory waterfowl. The Viet Cong had specific rules for treating American prisoners. The soldier in the photo was wearing a peace symbol necklace when he was captured in 1969. The North Vietnamese officer laughed in disbelief. The image became a Look magazine cover and a symbol of the absurdity of war. In the final months of the war, Hitler armed 12-year-old children in the Volkssturm and the Hitler Youth. Many were captured in Berlin. The boy in the photo, Hans-Georg Henke, became a symbol of the regime's collapse when the image circulated in 1945. The United States raised $185 billion in war bonds during World War II. Models and actresses paraded through the streets with slogans. The campaign was so aggressive that children bought 25-cent stamps at school to paste in booklets until they completed a bond. Friends of Hank Mason posed in 1894 reenacting the hunt in which the bear that attacked him was killed. The photo reproduces the position of the animal and the hunters to record the outcome of the fight that nearly took Mason's life. In 1937, the German-American Bund gathered 1,000 men with Nazi armbands in Andover, New Jersey. The group had up to 25,000 members in the United States. The leader, Fritz Kuhn, was arrested for embezzling money from his own organization. Mussolini was arrested in Bern in 1903 for socialist agitation and expelled from Switzerland twice. He was 20 years old and a Marxist journalist. In 1914, he was still a socialist. He changed sides after World War I and founded the Fascist Party in 1919. In May of 1923, the International Women's Congress in Rome gathered delegates from 26 countries. Mussolini appeared to open the event, wearing a dark suit and military boots. He gave a speech promising the vote to Italian women. He lied. Women's suffrage only came in 1946 after the fall of fascism. The British, American, and French delegates left the event in collective protest. Gas attacks killed 90,000 soldiers in World War I. The masks from 1916 were so uncomfortable that the British played football matches with the equipment just to test how long they could breathe inside them. Stefan Bobrowski had congenital hypertrichosis. His body was covered in hair up to 8 inches long. He worked in European and American circuses from 1892 to 1932, earning the equivalent of $800 per week. He spoke 5 languages. He died at 41 of heart failure. German troops capture a French crewman abandoning his Char B-1 during the collapse of defenses in 1940. Even with tanks heavier and more armored than the German Panzer IIIs, France suffered from communication failures, tactical slowness, and divided command. The Blitzkrieg advanced too fast for any organized response, demoralizing entire units and leading to complete defeat in just 6 weeks. Johnny Eck was born without a body below the waist. He walked using his hands, performed acrobatics, and drove an adapted car. He became famous in Freaks in 1932. He refused prosthetic surgery his entire life and died wealthy at 79 years old in Baltimore. Martin County was not a doctor. He learned in France and opened incubator shows in Coney Island in 1903. Premature babies were displayed behind glass for 25 cents admission. and this funded neonatal care at no cost to the parents. He saved 6,500 lives in 40 years. American hospitals only adopted the incubator as routine in 1939. The county died, broke in 1950. The Nez Perce of the American Northwest created the Appaloosa breed, horses with spotted hindquarters, more resistant and agile than common ones. In 1877, Chief Joseph led a flight of more than 1,000 miles with 800 people trying to escape the United States Army. He was caught about 37 miles from the Canadian border. The horses were confiscated and crossbred, nearly extinguishing the breed for decades. A portrait of 10 indigenous leaders made in 1891, bringing together figures from distinct native nations who were still fighting to preserve their lands, traditions, and authority during the period of forced expansion of the United States. Cheryl Brown won Miss Iowa in 1970 and was the first black woman to compete in Miss America. The pageant had for years a clause requiring white race, struck down in 1950. Joaquin El Fantasma worked in the Buenos Aires police in the 1930s as an undercover agent. He carried a wooden rifle to fool criminals when he went out in plainclothes. The nickname came because he appeared in places where nobody expected him. The last thylacine, known as Benjamin, died on September 7, 1936, at the Hobart Zoo in Tasmania. Staff forgot to let the animal out of the external enclosure on a cold night, and it froze. The species was declared extinct in 1986. Audrey Hepburn received a deer from the animal trainer during Green Mansions in 1959. The fawn, Pippin, became a pet. It rode in cars, went shopping, and slept in the actress's bathtub in Beverly Hills. Ham, the first American chimpanzee in space, flew in January of 1961. Trained for 18 months, he was supposed to pull levers during the flight. He survived, but life in zoos afterward was unhappy. In 1956, Ralph Cuomo and Joseph Benanti were arrested after a jewelry firm robbery in New York that ended in a shootout. After serving their sentence, Cuomo opened Ray's Pizza on Prince Street, the most famous pizzeria in the East Village for decades. The legitimate front concealed a heroin operation for the Bonanno family. Cuomo died in 2016 at 81 years old, always introduced as the pizza man of the Lower East Side. In 1947, King Abdulaziz Al Saud of Saudi Arabia visited the 20th Century Fox Studios in Los Angeles and had lunch at the Café de Paris cafeteria. Seated a few yards from him, a young unknown was starting her career as a junior contract player, Marilyn Monroe. Charles Schulz started Peanuts in October of 1950 with 7 readers. He was inspired by Spike, his spotted and half-crazy dog. The strip became a $1 billion-a-year business. Schulz drew each of the 17,897 strips by his own hand. He died in 2000 on the same day as the last strip. The Papuans of New Guinea saved thousands of Allied soldiers in 1942. They carried the wounded on stretchers through the Owen Stanley Mountains. The Australians called them Fuzzy Wuzzy Angels. Many still receive an honorary pension from the Australian government today. Women's shooting clubs in the United States existed since the 1920s. They were considered a sign of modernity. In 1956, the NRA had more than 80,000 women as members. Some Catholic girls' schools offered shooting as an extracurricular subject until 1971. The straight silhouette of 1920s fashion was a protest. Women had won the vote and wanted a neutral body, no defined waist, no prominent breasts. Some bandaged their chests with wrapping. The fashion lasted until the crash of '29. During World War II, the United Kingdom trained 1.5 million civilians in the Home Guard. Women taught self-defense at community centers because the men were away. The manuals included jiu-jitsu moves, fireplace pokers, and pots as improvised weapons. In 1931, the psychologists Winthrop and Luella Kellogg raised the chimpanzee Gua, 7 months old, alongside their son Donald, 10 months old. The two slept in the same bed and took the same tests. The experiment was canceled 9 months later when Donald began imitating chimpanzee grunts instead of speaking. Charles Robb was Lyndon Johnson's son-in-law. He married Linda in 1967 and went to serve in Vietnam as a Marine captain. He sent cassette tapes from Hanoi to his wife with helicopter noise and gunshots. Johnson listened to the tapes alone in the Oval Office. In March of 1968, he announced he would not seek re-election. The war had destroyed his mental health. The Italian campaign of World War II lasted 20 months, from 1943 to 1945. The Germans entrenched themselves on every hill. There were 320,000 Allied casualties in exchange for 460,000 German. Monte Cassino was attacked 4 times before it fell. Spitalfields in the East End of London was in 1903 one of the most miserable areas of the industrialized world. Life expectancy was 30 years. The chuck wagon was invented in 1866 by Charles Goodnight, a Texas cattleman. It was a wagon with 32 compartments for utensils, food, and medicine. The ranch cook earned 20% more than the average cowboy and was a sacred figure. Anyone who challenged him paid with burned meals. The standard menu was beans, biscuits, coffee, and bacon 3 times a day. Bear treatments were common in the Balkans and rural Romania until the 1980s. Healers walked through villages with trained bears that trampled patients to relieve lower back pain. Did it work? Yes, for the same reason massage works, just with about 440 pounds on top. The Chinese practice of foot binding began in the 10th century and lasted 1,000 years. They broke the bones of the foot at 4 or 5 years old. Ideal feet measured about 2 3/4 inches. It is estimated that 2 billion girls went through the process. Banned in 1912, it continued in villages until the 1950s. Croatian Catholic tattoos were done on girls starting at 10 years old. They served to prevent them from being kidnapped and converted by the Ottomans. The practice lasted 500 years, mainly in Bosnia. The elderly women in the photo bore marks from their grandparents and their children. Steam perms were the aesthetic torture of the 1930s. Women spent up to 8 hours connected to a 31-pound device that heated the hair to nearly 212 degrees Fahrenheit. The inventor, Karl Nessler, tested it first on his wife. She lost her scalp in 2 attempts. The Chinese kanji, used until 1912, was a wooden collar weighing up to about 44 pounds. It prevented the prisoner from lying down and from bringing food to the mouth alone. They depended on family or strangers to eat. It was the standard punishment for theft, gambling, and adultery. In 1979, a young woman holds up a sign in front of the Metro Theater in New York. It was the height of the protest for the freedom of adult cinemas, which that year faced an offensive by the Ed Koch administration to close 140 establishments in Times Square. The No Bra movement gained strength in the United States after the Miss America protest in Atlantic City in September of 1968, when feminists threw bras, corsets, and false eyelashes into a freedom trash can. In the 1970s, thousands of women took to the streets of New York without bras. Global sales of the garment dropped 30% by 1971. In 1957, Alfred Hitchcock posed for a photo session serving tea to Leo, the MGM mascot lion. The image was made to promote the 2-film contract Hitchcock had just signed with the studio. Hitchcock said at the time, "It was the first time in my life I was truly afraid." In the 1920s, American police measured the size of women's swimsuits with a ruler at the beach. Skirts shorter than about 6 inches above the knee resulted in arrest for indecency. The laws were only struck down in 1937. The Beautiful Eyes contest ran in Paris from 1929 to 1939. The jury was all male. The winners were usually cabaret singers or cigarette models. In 1932, Madeleine Rupert received 5,000 francs, the equivalent today of about $3,500. Sunbathing masks were fashionable in the United States between 1928 and 1940. They were made of leather. Women wanted tanned legs, but a pale face. A tanned face was associated with farm work. The fashion died when Coco Chanel killed it. In 1907, an alligator farm in Los Angeles had 1,000 animals loose in pools. Children rode in carts pulled by alligators. The owner, Joe Campbell, sold bags, belts, and meat from the animals. The farm closed in the 1950s for cruelty. Pig races were a common attraction on California beaches between 1910 and 1930. The animals ran after corn cobs. In 1925, a pig named Speedy reached about 17 miles per hour in Long Beach, a record never matched by another pig in competition. Pie eating contests without using hands were popular in the United States until 1940. The 1929 record was 23 slices in 7 minutes. Some people vomited in the middle of the competition and went back to competing. In the Normandy invasion, approximately 20,000 French civilians died in the Allied bombings that prepared the invasion. Children who lost their parents in the explosions were placed in the care of the soldiers themselves in the following weeks. Jim Thorpe won gold in the decathlon and pentathlon at the 1912 Olympics. His sneakers were stolen hours before the final. He found 2 mismatched shoes in the trash, used socks to fill one, and won anyway. The King of Sweden called him the greatest athlete in the world. The 391st American Battalion camped on Vesuvius during the eruption of March 1944, the largest eruption of the volcano in the 20th century. About 80 American planes were destroyed by the ash. The soldiers toasted bread on the lava while waiting for the evacuation. In 1935, some Civil War veterans were still alive. The last one died in 1956 at 109 years old. Black shoe shine boys earned about 5 cents per pair. On a good day, they collected the equivalent of about $8 today and shared with the family. Oh, Antoine Yates kept a 440-pound tiger in a Harlem apartment for 3 years. He also had an alligator named Al in the bathtub. The police only found out when he showed up at a hospital with a bite on his arm saying it was a pit bull. The Great Smog of 1952 killed approximately 4,000 people in 5 days. Visibility dropped to less than 1 foot. Drivers abandoned cars in the middle of the street, and cinemas closed because the smoke entered the theaters. Uncle Sam was inspired by Samuel Wilson, a meat supplier for the Army in 1812. The barrels were marked U.S., which the soldiers read as Uncle Sam. The image with the striped hat was made by James Montgomery Flagg in 1916 and enlisted 4 million soldiers. The Onabugeisha were female samurai trained from childhood. They used the naginata, a curved spear about 6.5 feet long, lighter and more agile than the male katana. Tomoe Gozen, the most famous, fought at Awazu in 1184 and cut off the head of the enemy general in battle. In mid-flight, a mechanic climbs out of the cockpit to repair the engine of a small Cirrus airplane in 1940. Maneuvers like this were common in the golden age of amateur aviation, before FAA rules tightened in the 1950s. Outdoor rural barbershops charged 10 cents per shave in the 1930s. When razors were unavailable, some barbers actually used small, sharpened hatchets. The result depended on the steadiness of the wrist. On a Pacific island, American soldiers care for a wounded dog, part of the war dog units used to detect enemies. Approximately 11,000 dogs served in the armed forces during World War II. Belgian miners returned to the surface in man cages. Steel elevators where 20 to 30 men were squeezed together for descents of up to about 650 feet. The cable rose at about 40 feet per second. Accidents were very common in these elevators. Emmeline Pankhurst was arrested 13 times. She went on hunger strike 4 times and was force-fed, a tube shoved down her throat. In 1914, she tried to deliver a petition to King George V demanding women's suffrage and was arrested on the steps of the palace. The head of Christ the Redeemer weighs about 33 tons and measures about 12 feet. It was made in Paris by sculptor Paul Landowski and brought to Rio in pieces. Rio only paid for the assembly with Catholic donations. The first selfie in history is from 1839. Robert Cornelius in Philadelphia took a daguerreotype of himself. He stood still in front of the camera for 15 minutes. The pose was taken, as he wrote on the back, just to test whether the method worked. Popeye Watton served in the British Navy for 21 years. He did not inspire the comic character. The cartoon came first, but the nickname stuck precisely because his colleagues thought he looked like the catfish-faced sailor from the magazine. The cone bra was popularized by Howard Hughes in the 1940s in films like The Outlaw. Madonna brought the model back in 1990 with the costume by Jean-Paul Gaultier. Some of these bras used extra wire and weighed nearly 7 ounces. Polygamy in 19th century Egypt was permitted by Islam with up to 4 wives, as long as the husband treated all equally. The Family Code of 2000 still allows this in the country, but the current wife must be notified before the second marriage. Personal rockets were fashionable in the 1920s. Max Valier died in 1930 testing a liquid fuel engine in his own workshop. The Germans invested so much in amateur research that by 1944 they were already launching the V-2, the first operational ballistic missile. Automotive air conditioning only became popular in the United States after 1953. Before that, drivers used the swamp cooler. It cooled about 9 degrees Fahrenheit in dry climates. In humid climates, it turned the car into a rolling sauna. On August 17, 1900, Franklin Schenck caught a giant sea bass weighing nearly 440 pounds off the coast of California using a regular fishing rod. It took him nearly 4 hours to pull the fish to the pier. About 670,000 American soldiers returned wounded from World War II. More than 14,000 had legs or arms amputated. The Letterman Military Hospital, next to the Golden Gate, received thousands of them between 1945 and 1947. In 2009, milk was worth 21 euro cents per quart in Europe, below production cost. Farmers poured millions of quarts on the ground in protest. In Brussels, they filled water cannons with milk and sprayed the European Commission headquarters. American sororities emerged in 1851. In the 1940s, they controlled housing, marriages, and even scholarships. Each house required white race and Protestant religion. Today, more than 4 million American women belong to a college sorority. In 1962, 2 rival hockey teams stopped a game to help Jack Evans of the Chicago Blackhawks find a contact lens lost on the ice. They spent 20 minutes searching on their knees. They found it intact. The game resumed normally. The seal on Tutankhamun's tomb remained intact for 3,245 years, tied with the same twisted papyrus rope by Egyptian priests in 1323 BC. It was broken by Howard Carter in February of 1923. It was the only royal tomb in the Valley of the Kings found practically without looting, with more than 5,000 objects inside. Hypnotizing chimpanzees was a legitimate neuroscience study in the 1940s. The London Zoo recorded 14 attempts between 1938 and 1952. None worked. The chimpanzee brain has a much smaller prefrontal area, which limits focus on verbal commands. Rural families pulled teeth at home with pliers, and alcohol and infection killed many. Dentists in the United States were only required to have a university degree starting in 1923. Before that, anyone could open a practice. The horse Samson, a Shire breed, was measured in 1850 at about 7 feet 2 inches at the withers. He weighed about 3,300 pounds, equivalent to a large SUV. He still holds the world record for the largest horse ever recorded. Terry Sawchuk received more than 400 stitches on his face during his NHL career before goalie masks became mandatory. He broke his nose 9 times and lost 4 teeth. He died at 40 in 1970 from internal hemorrhaging after a bar fight. Tour de France cyclists smoked cigarettes in the 1920s, believing it opened their lungs before long climbs. Doctors of the time supported the idea. Athletes used cocaine and amphetamines. The first doping death was Tom Simpson in 1967 on Mont Ventoux. Ice was delivered to homes in the United States until the 1940s. Ice boxes needed about 55-pound blocks every week. Delivery workers climbed up to 5 floors carrying the block with a hook. In 1935, 90% of American homes depended on this. American soldiers dug individual trenches up to about 5 feet deep, called foxholes, whenever they stopped for more than an hour. They slept in pairs, taking turns on 2-hour watch shifts. On October 14, 1940, a German bomb pierced the asphalt and exploded inside Balham Station in London. It killed 68 people and opened a crater that swallowed a bus. The bodies were removed by the spoonful over an entire week. Manual telephone exchanges were still common in Japan in the 1970s. The operators were almost all women, worked 6-hour shifts, and handled 200 calls per hour. Each connection error resulted in a salary deduction. The Tank Man was filmed on June 5, 1989, much by foreign journalists, during the Tiananmen Square protests. To this day, nobody knows what his name was. The Einsatzgruppen killed approximately 1.5 million Jews in open-air shootings before the gas chambers were even operational. The soldiers received extra rations after the executions. Several requested transfers due to nervous breakdown. Werner von Braun was an SS officer and designed the V2s that killed 9,000 civilians in London and Antwerp. Approximately 12,000 prisoners died at the Mittelwerk factory producing the rockets. In 1945, he surrendered to the Americans and became director of NASA. Bergen-Belsen was liberated on April 15, 1945. The British found 13,000 unburied corpses and 60,000 survivors. Anne Frank died there just weeks before. The soldiers who entered first received psychiatric leave afterward. 7 of the 10 Ovitz siblings had dwarfism. The Lilliput musical troupe toured Europe in the 1930s, singing in Hungarian and Yiddish. In Auschwitz, Mengele used them in experiments, but decided to keep them alive. All survived the war. Padang women of the Kayan ethnic group began wearing bronze rings on their necks at 5 years old. By 25, they could carry up to about 20 pounds of metal. In 1935, a group came to London to work at the Bertram Mills Circus, billed as giraffe women. In 1913, Cornelius Bruns stood about 7 feet 7 inches tall. Next to him, the shortest man in Europe was under about 3 feet 3 inches, and the heaviest exceeded about 440 pounds. The 3 worked together in circuses in Germany. Bruns died at 35 from heart problems. In 1962, the town of Brookings, Oregon invited Nobuo Fujita to its annual festival. 20 years earlier, in 1942, he had been the only Japanese pilot to bomb the continental United States. Fujita accepted and presented the mayor with his family's 400-year-old samurai katana. He returned 3 times and planted a sequoia at the bombing site. Maria Kalinina was elected the first Miss USSR in 1988. The Soviet Union itself only lasted 3 more years after that. The pageant was seen as a sign of the cultural openness of perestroika. More than 2,500 candidates registered in Moscow alone. The armed forces of the United States were segregated until 1948. The men in the photo served in the 333rd Artillery Battalion, one of the few black units authorized to operate heavy cannons. They fired against German targets in the Battle of the Bulge. The Face of War, by Dali, was painted in 1940 when the artist was in exile in New York. The head with infinite smaller heads references Goya. Little remembered, Dali supported Franco until death and was expelled from the Surrealist movement for it. On the morning of Black Tuesday, October 29, 1929, the New York Stock Exchange lost $14 billion in hours. Families tried to sell cars and furniture on the street at rock-bottom prices. The car in the photo would cost approximately $1,700 today. Brigitte Bardot broke out at 18 with And God Created Woman in 1956. She appeared in more than 40 films in 20 years. She left her career at 39 and never returned. Today she lives in Saint-Tropez and spends millions from her own fortune on animal rights. Christopher Robin Milne and his stuffed bear were the inspiration for his father to create Winnie the Pooh. The bear was purchased in 1921 on the boy's first birthday and cost about 35 shillings, the equivalent today of about 90 pounds. Today, the original bear is on display at the New York Public Library. Munda Point in the Solomon Islands was taken by the Americans in August of 1943. The Japanese airstrip was captured intact. In 3 months, the improvised medical effort saved 6,000 lives, but with mortality 10 times higher than in a regular hospital. Annie Oakley learned to shoot at 8 years old to support her family after her father's death. At 15, she beat the professional champion Frank Butler in a shooting duel and married him. She could hit a coin tossed in the air at about 100 feet. Nigerian tribal masks are sculpted in rituals that can last months. Each mask has a specific owner, none is merely decoration. In 1897, British soldiers looted more than 4,000 pieces from the Kingdom of Benin. The Ford Model T cost $290 in 1924, equivalent to about $5,000 today. Ford produced one car every 24 seconds on the assembly line. In 1920, half the cars in the world were Model Ts. Black was the only color because the paint dried faster. The photo into the jaws of death was taken by Robert Sargent at 7:40 in the morning on June 6, 1944, at Omaha Beach. Of the first 96 men who left that landing craft, 2 survived unharmed. The rest died or were wounded in the first 15 minutes. Jack Bonavita lost his left arm in 1904 in a lion attack during a show at Coney Island. He continued working with 15 animals. He died in 1917, attacked by another lion at Luna Park in Los Angeles. The Phantom of the Opera in 1925, with Lon Chaney, cost $600,000, astronomical at the time. Chaney invented his own makeup using wire and cardboard inside his cheek. The unmasking scene was filmed in secret. The actresses saw the face for the first time on the take. The Titanic left Southampton on April 10, 1912, with 2,224 people on board. It nearly collided on departure. The suction of the hull snapped the mooring lines of the neighboring ship. 4 days later, it hit the iceberg that would kill 1,514 people. The Irish spinning wheel turned about 240 times per minute. An experienced spinner produced about 300 feet of thread in a morning. Domestic linen production in Ireland died in the 1930s. Venus is hotter than Mercury despite being twice as far from the sun. The surface reaches about 870 degrees Fahrenheit. It rains sulfuric acid, but the drops evaporate before touching the ground because the air near the surface is too hot. In 1907, the first English automobiles reached about 22 miles per hour without a roof, doors, or windshield. Drivers wore diving goggles, leather coats, and blankets to protect themselves from the cold and dust. Asbestos was considered an industrial miracle at the beginning of the 20th century. It resisted fire, insulated sound, and was cheap. Female workers slept, ate, and breathed fibers through entire shifts. The first cases of asbestosis were diagnosed in Lancashire in 1924. Mesothelioma cancer appears 30 to 50 years after exposure. It was banned in the EU in 2005. Circus giants of the early 20th century almost always had acromegaly, a pituitary disease that continues producing growth hormone in adulthood. Most died before 40 from heart problems. Manta rays can have a wingspan of nearly 23 feet and weigh more than 2 tons. They have no stinger and are harmless to humans. Captain Conn probably did not even realize he had hooked one until the ray started pulling his boat out to sea. Betty Robinson was in a plane crash, was thought dead, and placed in a car trunk on the way to the morgue. She woke up from a coma 7 weeks later. 4 years later, she won gold in the relay at the Olympic Games. Conjoined twins have about a 1 in 200,000 chance of reaching birth. Of those, less than half survive the first month. These 2 sisters, adults and college graduates, work together as teachers, inspiring hundreds of students every year. Wooden bicycles were common in rural Europe between 1890 and 1920, before cheap steel arrived. Estonia had a tradition of Baltic pine carpentry. Farmers built everything: wagons, skis, and bicycles. The R-33 was one of the largest British airships, about 650 feet long. In 1925, it survived a storm that dragged it out of the hangar with mechanics on board. It returned under its own power. The model was retired after the R-101 crashed in 1930. The skulls found at the Selangor site in Ecuador are approximately 2,100 years old. They were placed around the heads of dead babies, forming a kind of double helmet. Archaeologists debate whether it was spiritual protection or a ritual of exchange. California surfing in the 1920s used solid boards weighing about 77 pounds. Duke Kahanamoku, a Hawaiian and Olympic medalist, introduced the sport to the mainland in 1912. In 1925, he saved 8 people from drowning using a surfboard as a boat in California. Elvis Presley bought his first Harley in 1956, at 21 years old, still without a driver's license. He learned to ride in the parking lots of Memphis. He had the habit of giving Harleys to friends. He once bought 14 motorcycles in a single afternoon in 1965. In May of 1933, Nazi students burned 25,000 books at the Opera Square in Berlin alone. The blacklist included Freud, Hemingway, Marx, and Einstein. Heinrich Heine had written a century earlier, "Where they burn books, they will eventually burn people." The 887 Moai statues on Easter Island have buried bodies. In 2010, excavations showed the bodies extend up to about 26 feet deep. The native population fell from 15,000 to 111 people between 1722 and 1877 from disease and enslavement. American textile factories employed 8-year-old children at the beginning of the 20th century. Lewis Hine photographed thousands on 12-hour shifts. The Supreme Court struck down the first child labor law in 1918. The end only came in 1938 with the Fair Labor Act. Mulberry Street in New York had, in 1890, one of the highest urban densities in the world, about 400 people per acre. The photos Jacob Riis took to document these areas shocked the country. Gold panners worked 10 to 14 hours a day with their feet in freezing water. Most developed herniated discs, arthritis, and lung problems before the age of 30. Even so, it was one of the few jobs available to freedmen after 1888. Churchill was captured by the Boers in 1899 during the South African War and escaped from prison by jumping over a wall. He became a celebrity in England before the age of 25. He nearly died hit by a car in 1931 in New York after looking the wrong way crossing the street. In the 1920s, the number of traffic deaths in the United States grew 1,000%. There was no mandatory driver's license in states like Washington until 1937. Most serious accidents happened at speeds below 25 miles per hour due to lack of brakes. Ladies of the Brazilian elite in the 19th century did not walk on foot. They were carried in sedan chairs by 2 slaves. Each sedan chair cost the equivalent of 18 months' salary of a free worker. It was a status symbol among wealthy families. In 1894, John Walter designed a car with a steam engine and tiller steering. It reached about 15 miles per hour. He went bankrupt 3 times. In 1908, Henry Ford launched the Model T for $825, and Walter's dream died with it. The RMS Mauritania held the title of fastest ship on the North Atlantic for 22 consecutive years, from 1909 to 1929. It was the sister ship of the Lusitania, the ocean liner, sunk by a German submarine in 1915, that helped push the United States into the war. Pianist and composer Harry Carroll with a group of girls from his chorus in Santa Monica, California. Carroll died poor because the copyright belonged to his lyricist partner, Joseph McCarthy, who kept everything. In 1929, the last flocks of sheep crossed London on their way to the Smithfield slaughterhouses. The practice had lasted since the Middle Ages. The right to drive cattle through the city still formally exists.